morning. Welcome to another great week here at the Valley. Thank you for joining us here in the Cardinal Broadcasting Network studio. I'm Jennifer Hannigan, Public Information Officer here at Trinity Valley Community College, and you're watching Valley News, a weekly broadcast that brings you news and information about what's going on here at TVCC. Normally, here at the beginning of our broadcast, I'll feature upcoming events or talk about things that have occurred recently. Today, we're going to forego all of that and turn our attention to a more serious but very important subject. 2 weeks ago, we had TVCC Police Chief Heath Carricker on with us, and today, Chief Carricker is going to come back into the studio where we will be talking about another aspect of campus safety, what to do if we have an active shooter scenario on one of our campuses. I know this has been in the news a lot lately, and so we felt that it was a very good idea to have Chief Carricker come back on and talk about what our protocols are here at Trinity Valley in case a situation like this ever occurs. Welcome back, Chief Carricker. I'd say it's good to have you back, but it is sort of a somber topic this morning.
It is. It's very somber.
So let's just kind of start out with some of the basic things that we have in place. I know there was a meeting earlier this week last week, for residential students where we talked about the processes that we have and some of the things that people should keep in mind. And you also showed a video to those students, which will be shown in just a couple of minutes here on this broadcast. Let's sort of talk about just the overview of some of the information that you're trying to get out to our student body.
Okay. The first thing I'd like to say is that our purpose and our message behind the active shooting information that we're putting out is awareness and preparedness. It's not, we're not trying to scare the students, faculty, or staff. We're not looking to make anybody paranoid. We're not looking to cause panic. I want people to think of this like they would fire safety information, to where there's a possibility at some point you may be involved in a fire and you need to have that information. Same way with severe weather or tornado information. We want to make sure that you have something, a skill set, even if it's very basic, in what to do should this thing occur. Another way to look at it is there's about 300 million people in the United States. Let's just say there were 30 people a year killed in active shootings. That makes your chances 1 in 10 million. Okay? It's almost like getting struck by lightning. I'm not saying that we shouldn't take it seriously and that we shouldn't keep it in mind, but I do want people to understand that they shouldn't walk around in living fear. Another thing I want you to understand is that it is not a school-only phenomenon. It can happen in a church, at a shopping mall, any place where people gather. There is a possibility that this could happen. So hopefully the skills that we discussed today will help people, and they'll take away something that they can use, pass it on to their families, pass it on to their friends, and remember that it's ubiquitous. You can use it anywhere you go.
That makes perfect sense. And one of the things that always gets asked when we look at these scenarios, and it's always 2020, such as the recent situation in Harris County, is could we have identified someone beforehand? Are there ways to identify a possible suspect, someone who might have those sorts of thoughts? And I know there's no perfect answer. There's no great solution. Sometimes those things are very easy to see. Sometimes they're very difficult. But you mentioned to me the other day when we were talking that there are just a couple of general things that people should watch out for. Would you mind going over that just a little bit?
Absolutely. And first of all, one of the reasons that it's extremely hard to create a profile, per se, for an active shooter is because the rationale behind the shootings are always different. It could be politically motivated. It could be a terrorist. It could be a mentally deranged person. It could be any number of things. Some things to look out for. One is if a person makes known that he may or she may want to carry out one of these acts. Like, say, for instance, someone keeps making comments about coming in and shooting up the place where they work. Or they make comments of, if I had my way, you would all be dead type comments. That's one thing. That's one thing. Another thing would be where a person begins to act out in strange and unusual ways that go completely against the norm, or at least their norm. And that could be things like an obsession with weapons, an unhealthy obsession with weapons, video games, where they get lost in the game and it becomes the focus of their life. Typically, you have to remember that people that do this are, you really have to just sort of sell out your humanity to be able to do this. So that person may have a very flat affect. They may not care about anything, anybody, or anyone. And if you have a person that's normally a caring person, and that person completely changes to the point that, you just have the feeling they wouldn't care if you got ran over by a truck. Might be something to look at. And also I want to point out that some of the characteristics also mimic characteristics of a person who may be suicidal. So not only would we want to address it from that standpoint, but we want to make sure that we have a person who doesn't want to do harm solely to themselves also. Because especially if it was one of our students, or we want to make sure that we picked up on those key indicators and that we were able to get them into the appropriate counseling or whatever assistance that they could need.
That makes sense. So in a student, drastic changes in behavior, obviously, I can see where that would be the sort of thing that would matter. And we didn't talk about this earlier, but I want to talk to you a little bit about this. I know a lot of times these sorts of situations are either personal conflict or domestic violence related. And so if it were someone here who is a student and they feel that that's a possibility, someone who's going through a divorce, someone who's had a serious personal conflict where they feel they may have some concern for their safety, but not necessarily related to another student here. Is there a resource for them? Should they let their instructor know? Again, you don't want to cause panic, but you also want to create a measure of caution where it's necessary. Are there steps that you would recommend in those cases? Because I know a lot of the time, and I won't say a lot of the time, but I know it does occur where it's in schools where it's not someone who's necessarily here, but someone who has a connection to a student or someone who works here?
That's a great question. The first thing, like we talked about earlier, is awareness. I ask that whoever was having that problem come forward and make it known. And we have run into a situation or two similar to that. And what we do is we begin to monitor the situation. We begin to try to find out specific things that we feel may be telltale indicators of possible violence. There are some steps we can take without going into all the minutiae of what they are, but our focus at that point would be to keep an eye out for the person that they feel like could be an actor against them, and also to gather as much resource material on that individual as we can.
So the recommendation would be if someone is in that situation to come to campus security and just have a talk with you and
absolutely
say that this may be nothing, but I do feel like it might be a little bit of a concern as well.
Oh, absolutely. I'd much rather err on the side of caution.
Okay.
And you're perfectly welcome to come in and do that. I really need to know that kind of stuff.
Okay, and you mentioned to me earlier that there's a behavioral incident team. Is that what it's called? Is that a resource for us on campus as well?
That is correct. If a subject's identified, whether it's student, faculty, or staff, that could have an issue as far as, and it doesn't just have to be in the realm of active shootings, it could be, like we talked about, suicide, workplace violence, just various and sundry things that could disrupt the campus community. That person can be forwarded to the behavioral incident team. And then what the team does is it's cross-discipline. There's people from different areas of the campus community will come in and will evaluate with the given information what we have. We may also have to interview that person. Now, one thing I will say is if there is a referral, if a person wants to give that information, they can contact myself. They can contact Charles Huber. They can contact Dr. Jay Kinzer. That would probably be the very first three. If you're in housing, you may want to contact Harold Jones, who's our housing director. If you want to do it anonymously, we do have a tool for that.
Okay.
If you'll go to the police portion of the TVCC website,
which can be found on the home page under departments.
That's correct. There is a link that says anonymous reporting. And you could go in there. It's going to ask you some specific questions, and then it's going to give you an opportunity to explain your concern. Okay. And then at the bottom, it's going to ask if you would please identify yourself. But you don't have to do that. And it says it quite clearly. And then you can submit that. And once it's submitted, I'll receive that, and then it goes to the team, and we begin the process.
Okay, that sounds like a really good tool. Okay, let's move on to sort of the courses of action that can be taken. I know a lot of what you guys have been saying and putting out to the student body is directly related to the recommendations made by the Department of Homeland Security. And the Department of Homeland Security has actually issued a short video just about things that they should be done on campus. Would this be a good time to watch that video?
Yeah, let's take a look at the video, and then after that, maybe we'll come back and talk about some specifics in that video.
Okay, we'll be back in just a moment.
We have an active shooter. Stand by for further information.
Tragedies such as the 2007 mass shooting on the campus of Virginia Tech, the 2009 shooting at the Fort Hood, Texas military post, and the 2011 attempted assassination of Representative Gabrielle Giffords at a public appearance in Arizona are all examples of active shooter situations. An active shooter is an individual actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people inside an occupied structure or outside in a populated area. In most cases, there is no pattern or method to their selection of victims. Active shooter situations are unpredictable and evolve quickly. It is important to be prepared for such an event. Make it a practice to identify potential escape routes and have a plan in mind, even if you are just visiting a facility. In the event of a shooting at your location, you must quickly determine the most reasonable way to protect your own life. You will need to determine if the best course of action is to evacuate or to hide. Call 911 when it is safe to do so. If there is an accessible escape route, attempt to evacuate. Be sure to leave your belongings behind. Help others escape if possible, but do not attempt to move wounded people. Evacuate regardless of whether others agree to follow. Warn individuals not to enter an area where the active shooter may be, and follow the instructions of any police officers. If evacuation is not the best option, find a place to hide where the shooter is less likely to find you. And be sure your hiding place does not trap or restrict you or your options for movement. Consider the difference between cover and concealment. Cover will protect you from gunfire, and concealment will hide you from the view of the shooter. Quickly choose the best option. If you are caught out in the open and cannot conceal yourself or take cover, you might consider trying to overpower the shooter with whatever means are available. To protect your hiding place, lock the door if you can. Block the door with heavy furniture and close, cover, and move away from windows. Hide behind large items such as cabinets or desks. Remain quiet. Silence your cell phone and/or pager. Even the vibration setting can give away a hiding position. When you call 911, remember to tell the operator the location of the active shooter. If there are multiple shooters, physical description of and number of weapons held by the shooter, as well as the number of potential victims at the location. When law enforcement arrives on the scene, their primary goal is to eliminate the threat and stop the shooter as soon as possible. First responders will not be able to stop to help injured persons until the environment is safe. Knowing what to expect will help keep you calm and allow law enforcement to quickly neutralize the threat. Officers may arrive in teams with tactical equipment such as vests, helmets, and rifles. They will need to take command of the situation. Expect to experience officers shouting orders and even pushing people to the ground for their safety. It is possible that officers from multiple jurisdictions will arrive on the scene. When law enforcement officials arrive, it is important that you keep your hands visible at all times. Avoid making any sudden movements. Avoid pointing, screaming, and/or yelling. Put down any items. Immediately raise your hands and spread your fingers. Remain calm and follow instructions. Do not stop to ask officers for help when evacuating. Just proceed in the direction from which officers are entering the location. For more awareness resources, please visit dhs.gov/critical infrastructure.
Thank you so much for letting us see that, Chief Carricker. I hope that that information is really useful to our student body. Can you share just some general thoughts on that video or things that you would like to sort of, expand upon?
Yes. One thing I want you to notice in that event is that it's a very fast event. It happens very quickly. And typically it doesn't last very long. 10 to 15 minutes is an average time for an active shooter incident to transpire. You have to make a lot of decisions in a very short period of time with very little information. It's very difficult. So if you can't take away anything else, take away these 3 points. And that's evacuate, hide, act. I think those, if you can take that away and remember that, that's what's important. If at all possible, evacuate. If it's safe to do so, move away from the sound of gunfire. Move out of the building or enclosure that you're in. Move towards police. The other thing I would say is hide. If your passage is blocked, you can't get out, find a place to hide. Try to find a place that you feel would offer you some modicum of protection from gunfire. And lastly, act. Now we're talking about when you have no other option. We're talking imminent death, imminent serious bodily injury, then you act. And by act, you may have to throw chairs. You may have to work in Congress with people that are in the room with you to try to take this shooter down. And to let you know, that's how most shooters are stopped. 2 things. They either commit suicide or they're stopped by bystanders. Okay? Another thing I'd like to just say is on the evacuation part is when you're leaving the building. I think this is very key. When you're leaving the building, remember, law enforcement may not be able to readily pick out and discern who's the shooter and who is not the shooter. Just imagine a crowd of people coming at you. In the video, it talks about keeping your hands up and complying with police. That is very important. That is very important. You don't necessarily have to stop running, but you do need to keep your hands up. You need to identify yourself. If your name's Joe Smith, I'm Joe Smith, I'm a student here. I'm Joe Smith, I'm a student here. Something where they know who you are. They may stop you. You may be frisked. You may be put to the ground. You even may be handcuffed. Remember, this is all for your safety as they go in to try to stop the shooter. Another thing that I want to mention, and I think is also very important, is when you're leaving, when you're escaping, you want to have a pre-planned escape route. Now, this is not anything that's complex, but when you go into an area, and this is also for fire safety or even weather safety, look around and see what are the available exits. If something should happen, where would I go? If it was a fire, where is the safest to go? If I needed a shelter for a tornado, where would I go? If a shooter came in here, where would I go? And always look for exit signs. I think that's very important.
Definitely a very good tip, some very good tips to have. And you're right, weather, fire, we often think about those things, but it's difficult to think about it in this situation, and so we don't always necessarily make those couple of mental preparation steps. One of the things that we've pushed before, and I really want to come back to this again, is in that situation, we will use the TVCC alert system.
Absolutely.
And so someone will set off that alert. So if you're off campus, you will get an alert on your cell phone if you're signed up to tell you don't come to campus. If you're on campus but you're in a different building, again, as Chief said, these things can happen very quickly, but that is the best way to get alerted here on campus is to be signed up for that text alert. You can do that on the main page of our website. There's a slide at the top. There's also up where we have all of our little social media icons. You'll see the Facebook and the Twitter. You'll also see it's the little exclamation point that's red. That's where you sign up for the TVCC alert. There was also something you said to me as well about having the campus police number programmed.
Yeah, it's really a good idea, and we had our students do this when we worked with our housing students, is I had them take out their phones and enter TVCC police as a contact, and then as the number 903 888-675-6235. And that way you'll have it ready to go. And of course, you can always dial 911.
Got it. But at least with having the TVCC police, there's that, that direct contact if there's something that is a close emergency, or you think that there's, something might be an emergency, right, but you're not sure. That's also a good contact information.
Exactly.
And I know when 911 is dispatched, they come, if it's something on campus, they'll come to you guys immediately.
That's
for
correct.
That first response. Okay. Any other thoughts you would like to share? Other things that we need to discuss today? I
just want to add that the police were very concerned about the safety of our students. We take any thing that they bring us, whether it's a concern for another student or faculty or staff member, very seriously. We follow up on that. And I cannot stress enough that we want to be aware, and we also want to be preventive if we can. So please don't please don't be afraid, rather, to come and communicate those concerns to us, because if we can stop something before it happens, that's a win.
And does that also play true for someone who's feeling a lot of stress? I mean, finals can be tough. College can be stressful. It's a big time of adjustment. So if you're struggling yourself with the stress, is there a resource on campus for you?
I would recommend that you go to our counseling resources, which are located in the admin building. There are folks there that are excellent at helping you work through a lot of those issues and maybe giving you some coping strategies. Or if you fall else and you know no one else to go to, you're welcome to come to me, and I'll get you, or try to get you, to who you need to on campus.
Got it. College can be stressful, so we definitely want to keep everybody safe. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you.
We really appreciate you taking the time to talk about a subject that isn't necessarily something we all want to think about. To our listeners, if you happen to be watching this broadcast, please feel free to share this link with other students. We feel this is important information. We want to get the word out as much as possible. Again, just as a precaution if there ever is a situation like that here at the Valley. That's all for this week's edition of Valley News. Thank you for hanging with us today. For more on what's happening each week around the Valley, check out the news section at the bottom of our homepage, on our Facebook page at facebook.com/Trinity Valley Community College, or you can follow us on Twitter at TVCC News. Thank you for joining us for another week of Valley News. I'm Jennifer Hannigan.